Recently, there was this whole trend within Magic the Gathering on Twitter to post your most controversial opinion that will upset the majority of Magic Twitter. The idea is to, throw out a hot take that has the whole Twitter community of Magic pointing their daggers at you. Most of these were relatively milquetoast, if I'm honest. Most of them are reasonable if you are a reasonable human. Some of them were just reasonable things repackaged, repurposed to sound controversial. They'd essentially gone through the filter that most YouTube thumbnails and titles have to go through to get you to click. One opinion though, or at least two different people posted a similar thing, was that Modern Horizons 1 and 2 were good actually, and that Commander Legends, I guess by proxy, is good actually. Printing brand new, huge swaths of brand new things that transform formats overnight is good actually. And ultimately, I don't think those opinions are very good. I think that's complete and I maybe want to make a video about it. So that's what this video is about. It's about Magic the Gathering cards being printed and aimed directly at older Eternal formats. Your Moderns, your Legacies, your Commanders, and soon, one day soon, Pioneer players, you aren't exempt from this. You will get Pioneer Horizons one day, and you will cry like the rest of us. I said west of us, the rest of us. This video is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com. Hit the link in the description below to get 5% off your order and to help support the show. And don't forget, I am streaming live on Whatnot twice a month. My next stream is on Friday. That's Friday the 14th. I'm giving away a Lord of the Rings booster bundle and other bits and bobs, selling some Ricky Martin cards. Come get involved. It's normally a good laugh. Use the link in the description below to get £10 off your first purchase, and again, to help support the show. Once upon a time, Modern and Legacy were just the homes of design mistakes and the things you couldn't play in Standard currently. If you are not aware of this because you only play Commander, there are other formats of Magic. That sounds like I'm really being sarcastic, but I think we have to go back into this like original step with where Magic is now. There are formats where you play 1v1 and you play from a selection of cards, you build a deck and play. Standard, for example, is the last, give or take, 2 years, now 3 years of design. And then what happens is every so often it will rotate, cutting things out and starting anew and becoming fresh and original. I understand and appreciate some people enjoy that fresh and original rotation. I find rotation frustrating because I want to play some of my favorite cards. Modern is everything from 8th edition onwards, and Legacy is everything ever, both of them having a ban lists. There's also Vintage, which is everything ever, hardly any bans, and a restricted list where you can play like 1 Black Lotus, 1 Ancestral Recall. Up until the release of Modern Horizons in 2019, and to a lesser extent with Legacy, the Commander precons in 2011, most things were printed into those formats via Standard. Some cards would come in like Deathrite Shaman and be not very good in Standard, but when you play them in formats like Modern and Legacy where fetch lands are available, so you can easily put lands in your graveyard and generate mana, as well as get access to the 2 other abilities which are both Graveyard Hate and a clock, or an anti-clock in many ways, these cards end up seeing no play in Standard but being very strong powerhouses in Modern and Legacy. Then you have like another category of card where it's a card that's very strong in Standard that immediately impacts Legacy. Snapcaster Mage is a card that saw extensive play in Standard, usually flashing back Wrath effects like Supreme Verdict, but also saw huge amounts of play in Modern and Legacy. Ironically to all this, Deathrite Shaman, my first example, is now banned in Legacy, and Snapcaster Mage isn't good enough to see play in Modern for reasons I'm going to come to in a moment. But this category of card is your best cards in Standard that end up being better, or even just as good in older formats. Current Sheoldred. This card is nuts. It's really good in Vintage and Legacy and Modern as well, because if you can make your opponent draw 7 cards, for example, it's going to shoot them for 14 damage. Some cards are so good they affect all formats. They're the most power crept versions of stuff. What's really funny is that Sheoldred probably won't be playable in maybe 5 years time because she'll get power crept out by the new things going through Standard, or more likely, the new things being printed directly into those formats and avoiding Standard. There are other things like true design mistakes like Oko, Luris, Omizawa's Jitte, Dark Depths, and similar, things that end up getting banned in Standard, or even in Modern, but end up living in Legacy or Modern, or eventually get banned in all of them because Oko was too good, for example. And there's also the really weird stuff that's a bit like Deathrite Shaman, where it has almost no play in current Standard, but then combos with something in an Eternal format. Heliod goes infinite with a ham sandwich, but most of those ham sandwiches were not printed into Standard, so it was never an issue for Standard. So for the longest time, that's how it worked. They printed a new set, it went into Standard, some of it saw play in older formats, normally 1 or 2 cards per set, at a push 3 or 4. But then they decided that they actually wanted to be able to print directly into those formats. Well, first, before that happened, 2011 Commander Precons. The Commander Precons were the first pre-constructed decks, hence what I'm calling the Commander Precons, very self-explanatory really, for Commander. Releasing in 2011, these things had a few cards that end up seeing Eternal play. The chief one among them is probably what's on screen now, Scavenging Ooze, a 2-mana creature that could fight Tarmogoyfs by eating things in the bins and shrinking them. Tarmogoyf being one of the best 2-mana green creatures ever printed. Scavenging Ooze immediately saw Legacy play and ended up being a card that people would buy the precon to play in Legacy. Because Legacy isn't just everything from Standard ever, it's every card ever printed, right? So that means anything in Commander products, Battle Bond, Conspiracy, and other supplemental products like that also end up making it into Legacy. But it's something that we kind of end up dealing with and people got upset about over time. True Name Nemesis is probably the best example of people being pissed off with cards being designed specifically for Commander. This card says choose an opponent and have protection from that opponent, which is fine in a 4-player game because 2 other players can interact with it and you can politic your way out of it. But in a 1v1 scenario, you just name your opponent and now you have one of the most protected creatures in the history of Magic that's also a 3/1 and carries an equipment really well. Again, ironically, it's not good enough for current Legacy. A card that was a boogeyman of the format, a card that pissed off many people, including myself, and made us say things like, perhaps they should stop putting things specifically into Commander that end up affecting Legacy. That card's not even playable anymore. A bit further down the line as well, to address supply issues, Scavenging Ooze got printed into Standard. Skoos got printed into Standard, end up in Modern, and made small splashes. It's a good card. To this day, you see the occasional one floating around in the green scene of package and Legacy, or occasionally in Modern. I've played it over the years in many a deck. The card is just solid, if not really pushing to break anything. But then over time, they realized that the older formats weren't as easy to monetize because all you could do really was use the reprint equity. See last week's video about reprint equity. You could use a reprint equity that Modern provided. People want fetch lands primarily for Modern and Legacy and a little bit for Commander. Thus, they have a demand. Thus, you can use them to sell product to people. Liliana of the Veil, Tarmogoyf, Snapcaster Mage, Dark Confidant, Vendilion Clique. Some of those aren't even playable anymore because they're not good enough. All of those cards should have been Modern Masters, the first way they tried to monetize the older formats. Because they're putting directly to you in a way the stuff that you want for Modern. So people are clamoring to crack those packs, and it was a good old time. But then I guess they realized that if they do Master sets too often, and they did a lot of them, Modern Masters 1, 2, and 3. In between that, we had Eternal, Iconic, Masters 25, Ultimate Masters, which was meant to be Graveyard Masters, but they rebranded to Ultimate Masters. I don't know why. Double Masters, fucking up my arsehole Masters. But they realized that if they keep reprinting things, for example, the fetch lands, they will crash in value. Fetches are currently below $20 when scoring time was nearly 100 at its peak. So they realized that there's a well they can't always go back to as they reprint all these staples into a master set every year. So what do? Well, you generate new equity, a new resource to go and use to sell cards in the future. You print more good cards. The argument is they can't do that through Standard. The argument is they can't put 50 cards that are good enough for Legacy and Modern through Standard because Standard will be dominated by those 50 cards that are good enough for Legacy and Modern because the power level is higher. So instead they go around it, they skirt around it by putting straight into Modern for the first time ever. Because it always used to be that Modern filtered through Standard. It filtered through Standard. And for the first time ever, we put it directly into it with Modern Horizons 1. The issue was there was so much good shit. Like I'm picking 3 here, 2 of which got banned everywhere, 1 of which is now a staple across multiple formats. It's now a big source of reprint equity for them. All of these cards are absolutely ridiculous across multiple formats. Astrolabe and Renin 6, for example, just warped Legacy and Modern around them and required bans. Hogak will forever be remembered for being an absolute ludicrous period of time in Modern because it was easily one of the best decks we've ever seen, and it was a blast for people like me because I played it and smashed people. I'm not even that good. And whilst it was fun and exciting, there's a huge downside to all of this because instead of printing the occasional card in Standard that makes it into Modern and either improves an old deck or creates its own new archetype, instead we had overnight 50-ish cards that absolutely transformed the format. Some cards, like Crashing Footfalls, for example, creates a new deck. You get Shardless Agent, which was also put into the set, that creates this new deck where you can cascade into this and get 2 4/4 Rhinos for essentially free off the back of a 3-mana spell. This means that new decks are made, decks that in theory create a cheap entry point to Modern. Bearing in mind that the original Master sets, the mission set they claimed was to make Modern cheaper to get into. I don't ever believe that was really the case. They wanted just to sell packs at a premium price because Modern is a premium format. And then we have new decks coming up like this that in theory should make accessibility easier because you can come in and buy a deck wholesale. But then the packs were of a premium price. The mana bases were still the old lands that hadn't been reprinted successfully yet. You still have these issues where it just creates a whole new expensive deck as opposed to making a cheaper entry point. And then you have cards that are just really, really good and will show up in sideboards and main boards of many, many decks. This isn't a new card creating new space for players to build into and play around. Instead, it's creating a super staple that everyone needs and will demand a high price tag. And this happened again with Modern Horizons 2. introducing like Solitude and Fury and cards that redefined Modern and Legacy. And then we see it with Commander Legends as well, and things like Dockside fucking Extortionist and the Commander products. We keep seeing new super staples printed directly into Commander, Modern and Legacy that warp formats or are damaging in some capacity. And I don't think it's that they are doing this inherently is the problem. I think it's just the amount with which they do it. To go back to the True Name Nemesis or the Scavenging Ooze examples before, having 2 or 3 cards per set or per product that happen to be good enough to see Legacy play or happen to be good enough to see Modern play is perfectly fine. The issue we find ourselves in now is entire swaths of new cards being printed that are designed to absolutely upheave and artificially rotate older formats to get people to have to buy into a whole new load of shit. It's one thing to have Legacy upended by the One Ring or Bowmaster, because Lord of the Rings, they've kind of got it right. Lord of the Rings also went directly into Modern for reasons that no one truly understands. Well, the real reason is it's fucking money, right? Someone at Wizards of the Coast in a CEO role said to a designer, why was Modern Horizons one of the most successful products of all time? Or maybe Modern Horizons 2. And they explained all the reasons that might be, the power level, the premium price, the printed directly into Modern. So the CEO or fucking shareholder or whatever says, do it again. Designer, do it again. And that means we get another straight into Modern set. But I think, to the credit of the people designing the game at Wizards of the Coast, Lord of the Rings hits the right power level. Some things are a little bit obnoxious in some formats. Some formats might be struggling with Smeagol. The One Ring is kind of absurd, but the occasional absurd card is okay. Orcish Bowmasters is another example. It's when they release a set that upends both Legacy and Modern, and to an extent Commander as well, although it's not competitive, so you don't have to keep up with the Joneses if you don't want to. But overnight you have 50 new cards, 5 new cards for every deck, entire new archetypes that are better than the old ones. They power creep out. They are more powerful than the old stuff. Tarmogoyf, fucking Scavenging Ooze, Vendilion Clique, Dark Confidant, most of these cards that were staples for years will get power crept out eventually, but it all kind of happened overnight with 1 or 2 sets. The issue is not designing specifically to impact Legacy or Modern. That's not the issue. Aiming a card with pinpoint precision accuracy is difficult, I get it, but it can happen. It's when you do that with 50 fucking missiles, you just end up with an absolute wasteland that doesn't even resemble what the format looked like before. That isn't to say that you can just power creep occasional bits and be done with it. During the Modern Horizons 1 through to Modern Horizons 2 window, the fire design, I don't know, apocalypse I'm going to call it, where everything was on fire. They have a thing called fire design, which I pointed a whole video on and unpack. I had to look up what the acronym even means at this point, but it pushed power levels so high that even things in standard sets were fucking everything up. From your Okos to your Lurises, 2 of the most pushed and broken Magic cards of all time. They're up there, top 5 easily. Through to Uros and Underworld Breaches. There was a whole period where everything was so pushed that every set just upheavaled every single other fucking format with these ridiculously powerful bombs. And they didn't mean to, I think, and they powered it back too. Current standard sets do have some interesting cards in them. I guess Kamigawa might arguably have a lot of good stuff. Bankbuster being like a truly powerful, colorless creature is kind of an issue. But they fixed it, and for the most part, I think the people designing cards at Wizards of the Coast are really good at what they do. There are blips, there are periods where they're pushing things too far. I just think when you do entire swaths of made for a format, that's when it falls down. It's not the idea of designing straight for Commander, increasing the legendary count, but when you're doing it every single set, like fucking multiple times, that's when we have semi-rotations. People feel like they can't keep up, and super staples coming out all the time. They get more and more expensive because they don't end up reprinting them as they print more nonsense stuff. Dockside shouldn't be the price that it is. Essentially, what I want to talk about in this video is how there are so many cards in all of these sets that I'm talking about right now that I really enjoy playing with. Like most of the designs in Modern Horizons 1 and Modern Horizons 2 are super interesting. Like mechanically interesting, they touch on lore and like retro nostalgia and jokes about Magic's history. Most of them feel clever and smart and fun to play with. I think it's the critical mass of being slapped in the face with 236 cards, 50 of which are absolutely fucking bonkers, is a bit too much. Ragavan coming through on his own is a mistake, but Ragavan coming through on his own, heralding the fucking coming apocalypse of Modern again as they print the fucking evoke cycle is nuts. I get nervous every single time I see a set is going straight into Modern now. Lord of the Rings made me nervous, but I think they did it correctly. Some of the cards are a bit pushed, but the majority of a really solid power level and fun and flavorful too. Modern Horizons 3, not that I think it's been announced, but it'll happen one day, scares me. Pioneer Horizons scares me. And if we have a format that comes out that's like newer than Pioneer, there'll be something like that for that as well. The final point I want to make, beyond saying that I like all this stuff, I think it's just a bit too much and has been for a long time, is the loss of exploration and like emergent gameplay. When I say emergent gameplay, I'm really referring to unintended emergent gameplay. We have a load of simple elements to a game that when given to a player base, they can put together and do things that maybe the designer didn't even intend in the first place. One of the examples I've always thought about with this is games where people end up putting C4 on vehicles and crashing them into bases to blow up objectives in video games in a way that wasn't intended by the designer. I think there's Bad Company 1 where you could fill a jeep with C4, crash it through a wall and detonate it to blow up a bomb site and do immense amount of damage. Then I'm pretty sure the developers said they never intended to be a way to get the bombs sorted because jeeps could fit through some of the gaps in some of the buildings. Anyway, it's unintended gameplay or combo. And when you print wholesale, powerful fucking kits of stuff into a set, you don't really get an emergent and interesting design or deck. You just get people playing with the pieces that they've been given. Instead of making a complex situation out of the tools, they're instead given a few Lego blocks and some instructions to build the house that the game designers envisioned. An example of this, the Ad Nauseam combo is a collection of very strange cards that when you look at them as a new player, they don't appear to really do anything, but they result in the opponent being dead. This deck is long gone for modern now, but in essence, you would stop yourself from losing the game with Angel's Grace, you'd draw your whole deck with Ad Nauseam, you'd use some Spirit Guides, you cast Lightning Storm, you pitch all your lands to it, and you kill your opponent. That came together through a collection of random pieces from random sets and people honing it and tuning it and figuring out how to break Ad Nauseam in some way, the original breaking of it in some ways for modern at the very least. That was people working on it. Meanwhile, I mentioned Crushing Footfalls earlier. This card is a 0 cost at the top corner, so you can't cast it, but it's a suspend spell, right? But at this point, at the point that Modern Horizons 1 was made, we already knew what happened with these sort of cards, is that you cascade into them. Living End had been a known entity in Modern for a very long time where you cascade into Living End and cast it for free off the back of a Cascader. So when a designer puts Crashing Footfalls, a suspend card with a 0 cost, into this set, into Modern Horizons 1, a format where Violent Outburst exists, we know for a fact people are going to Violent Outburst into Crashing Footfalls. It's a known entity, they know it's happening. The way Cascade and Suspend interact was not necessarily intentional, and we saw it with Shardless Agent and Ancestral Visions in older formats in the past. But once it's known, if you go back and design a Suspend card, you know how the player base is going to abuse it because it's a known entity. In some ways, you're just being given the deck, you're being given the recipe, and there's no need to figure it out. It's kind of like Baby's First Combo in a way. And this happens even worse in Commander. Because Commander used to be where you cobble together a lot of random shit that you have in your folders and rares that you like, and you play them. But now, entire synergies are built into precons that just tell you how to play the deck and how to build around it. It used to be that you'd go out of your way to make an old Commander work. Now we just print commanders that draw you cards, make you mana, and suck you off for the low cost of doing nothing but playing the game. It's that loss of discovery and that loss of having to work for what you want, that loss of being able to innovate because you're being given the tools and how they work. It's the same that when you build a deck around a limited environment mechanic, that often you'll find that when you involve the 12 cards that play designer put into the limited environment, let's say a mass in Lord of the Rings, you get all these cards with a mass on them and you're like, oh, they synergize. That's because they were designed to synergize. You won't find anything new. And I find that kind of boring. So to come to an end of this rambling video and to summarize, the problem is not designing specifically for those formats to try and pinpoint and push the power level on certain cards, it's designing it en masse. The issue is the artificial rotation that it brings, the new staples that then cost a bomb because they're in premium products every fucking time, and the loss of innovation or going into a space innocent to learn new things. Not completely gone, but we do lose it when they design specifically to give us a combo or a synergy. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Do you think that they shouldn't design for these formats at all? Or do you think I've got a point that doing it in small doses is probably permissible? It's probably excusable. Let me know in the comment section below, and don't forget, check out Whatnot and Course of Ink by the links in the description below, and I'll see you in the next one, you fucks.